Bruce wants to talk about homelessness in California and why he is concerned, particularly given the virus that has boosted his concern. It is a Dave Congleton Show, always your hometown radio talk show. Before I bring in Stu to the conversation, Mr. Stu Jenkins, let me see if I can kind of give you a quick synopsis of the month of March for Supervisor Adam Hill. Supervisor Hill is the chairperson of the County Board of Supervisors, and he was up for re-election this year. The election was March 3rd. He was challenged by first-time challenger Stacey Korsgaden. The election was not decided for about a week and a half. And normally Supervisor Hill wins elections by 15 to 18 points. This time he barely squeaked out a victory over Stacey. He won by about 3 points. So there was that election. But then the big day is Wednesday, March 11th. For the first time that any of us know in local history, the FBI decided to pay a visit to town. They hit 3 spots. We know 2 spots for sure. They visited Supervisor Hill's 4th floor office in the county building, and they visited his home in Shell Beach. They're in his office from about 7 a.m. to about 1 p.m. They're in his home from sometime in the morning till around noon. Supervisor Hill was at his home in Shell Beach. We know that at 1:22, after the FBI had left, emergency responders rushed to Adam Hill's house, and he was found unconscious. It took approximately 58 minutes to revive Supervisor Hill, at which point he was taken to Rio Grande Hospital. His stomach was pumped, and he was kept overnight. He was released the next day, and then he was put in a 5150 hold for 3 days, 3 nights, standard hold, and then he disappeared. Cal Coast News reported that it was a suicide attempt. KSBY and the Tribune simply said he was hospitalized. Then my guest, attorney Stu Jenkins, published an opinion piece on March 23rd, Countdown to SLO County Supervisor Adam Hill's Lost Office, in which Mr. Jenkins outlined the options facing Mr. Hill, who, by the way, has not shown up to any County Board of Supervisors meeting this month, even though he's the chair, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. Well, not 2 days later, after Stu's opinion piece, somebody released a press release from Adam Hill admitting that, yes, he had committed suicide due to the, quote, stress of the election. Keep that in mind. But he can't wait to come back to the job that he loves. That is, quote. Board of Supervisors not meeting until, I believe, the 3rd Tuesday in April. There's plenty to talk about. Why am I talking? Here's Stu Jenkins. Hey, Stu.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, is that an accurate assessment? Have I left anything out? Have I misstated anything?
You did one little thing.
All right.
Let's see. On the day before, the FBI raided Supervisor Hill's office and his home in the wee hours of the morning, based on what has been reported to be a sealed search warrant issued by a federal judge in Los Angeles. He actually did appear and chaired a short meeting of the Board of Supervisors. And by that time, he had found out that he was ahead and was likely to be winning the re-election. But between the election night and that time, he had essentially disappeared, according to the reporting, and had not reported to work and had not come in after he found out that he was behind his election opponent. So he did appear and attended one meeting, chaired that meeting. He seemed, in my view, I watched that meeting, he seemed strangely elevated in his mood. But that could have just been, I suppose, because he finally had felt that he won the election.
Yeah.
So but with those details, I think you've got a pretty good summary of what has gone on.
And Lynn Compton has stepped in, and she's been running the meetings in Adam Hill's.
She's been doing I have, full disclosure, I have represented Lynn Compton as an attorney previously in an election matter, but we're in different parties. We have differences on some policy issues, but she has been doing a very good job presiding and leading to the extent that she can, but of course she's not regarded as the chair by the staff or by state authorities or federal authorities, and here we are in a national emergency with essentially a plague that is sweeping the state and the nation, and she's just a caretaker technically until the chair comes back. So it doesn't really leave us in a good position.
Yeah.
Since you asked me to come on, I've been thinking a little bit about the whole situation, and I think one way to look at it is through some analogies.
Okay.
Here we are whether we were in a national emergency or not. If you think about the Board of Supervisors, they're essentially a legislative body. They do have a little bit of executive authority, particularly the chair of the board. But if you saw the FBI come in and search Nancy Pelosi's office or Mitch McConnell's office and their homes, and either or both of them attempted suicide within a few hours and were put on a 5150 hold, psychiatric hold, because they were viewed as a danger to themselves or others. The ordinary thing you would see happen the next day is the Senate would meet or the House of Representatives would meet, and they would do a very standard parliamentary resolution to make a motion to declare the Speaker's job or the Senate Pro Tem's job vacant. This wouldn't remove either of those people from Congress, but it would declare that leadership position vacant because they would need to have somebody who everyone could trust was stable and could lead them through a legislative session.
And I guess that's the big question, though, Stu, is that a lot of us have on our minds is what happens that next Tuesday in April when Adam Hill finally shows up? Is it just he sits down and he starts chairing the meeting, and we ignore the fact that he tried to commit suicide, that he's under investigation by the FBI, that he has publicly talked about his depression and already has had to take a leave of absence?
That really is going to depend on the rest of the board. Folks run for office so that they can exercise power and do good for the public. And, of course, our county now is in the midst of this pandemic. We're seeking as a county to have federal grant money and loan money come into the county to be used by the county to try to stave off this pandemic. Same thing with state agencies. The county is seeking a lot of help from state agencies, and we're unfortunately left in a situation where any state agency or federal agency that would be paying attention, and I think they are not going to feel confident if the chairman of the board is not stable, is not someone who can be expected to be able to lead.
Right.
And so it's really incumbent, I think, on the membership of the board. Even if Mr. Hill doesn't resign, or isn't removed, it's incumbent on them, I believe, to immediately, frankly, they should call a special meeting.
Well, because there are two separate issues here. One is his status as a supervisor, which, okay, there's a process for that, which we can get into. But the other that is separate to me is whether or not he should be the chair of the County Board of Supervisors. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
That is the most important issue at this stage. And largely because we do have an emergency, we need stable leadership at the top who the employees know is stable and who they can work with, and the various officers of departments in the county are going to know that that person is good for their word, and if they get together and get the Board of Supervisors to authorize A, B, and C, a week later they're not going to have a meltdown in their mental health and suddenly belay the orders for B and C.
Obviously, you've got Pashang, Arnold, and Compton. You've got 3 votes right there.
Well, I don't know. This is
theoretically.
This is not a partisan issue. If you think about the examples I just cited of Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, in either of those situations, the rest of the people in the body, be it the Senate, the House of Representatives, or the Board of Supervisors, should realize that they need a stable leader who can be trusted. And the other thing is, wouldn't they feel that they needed to relieve the stresses of the office for someone who is suffering a mental health collapse so that they can go get better?
Because he said he was stressed out by the election. If he's stressed out by the election, holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
I got to get this. I got to get this break in, Stu. I don't want to get too far behind. Attorney Stu Jenkins is here for the hour. We'll include your phone calls after news at the bottom of the hour. Plenty to discuss as we talk about this situation we find ourselves in with County Supervisor and Chair of the County Board of Supervisors, Adam Hill. What do we do? We'll be back and pursue. I'm Dave Congleton. This is Hometown Radio. All right, this is going to get interesting. We got Stu Jenkins on line 1. And we've got County Supervisor Lynn Compton on line 2. Supervisor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm calling from my shelter-at-home office, so I'm calling on my cell. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Supervisor. What's up?
Nothing. I just didn't know if you wanted any input from me on what's going on at the county. I do think we're okay right now, and we're managing, and we have a big crisis on our hands right now. With this coronavirus, so we're dealing with that right now at hand.
All right, but there's also a crisis in terms of your county chairman had tried to commit suicide, and he's under investigation by the FBI.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and before each meeting that we've had so far that have been scheduled that he hasn't been present at, I have taken over and taken the chairmanship position and run the meetings. I'm being told before the meeting, so he is actually the chairman until he steps down or a decision is made by the board to remove him from that position. And there's been no discussion yet, and there's not a meeting coming up for 3 weeks. So, I do feel kind of in the dark about things. I mean, we were not given the press release. It was released to the newspaper. I have since heard that there was an email sent to us by his wife with a similar comment that was sent to the Tribune, but we're really not being told much. So, I don't think we're being kept in the dark on purpose. I think there's just not a whole line of communication coming from Supervisor Hill.
And before I bring Stu into the conversation, Supervisor, the other obvious question is, in your mind, would there be any prerequisite for Supervisor Hill to come back as chair, given what happened on March 11th?
What do you mean? Would there be any prerequisite?
Well,
could he do it? Are you asking me? Could he do it?
No. Are you going to allow him to do it, or does it like, hey, we need a note from your doctor?
Well, I never thought about a note from the doctor. I mean, he has self-admitted he suffered a crisis, and he's self-admitted in his letter to the Tribune that that's his status. So I don't know if we would ask for a letter, from his physician or not. I mean, it happened. We were informed that it happened too. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. But the rotation is, he is the chairman of the board right now. The following year it is to be Lynn Compton. The following year it is to be Bruce Gibson. So that is the rotation currently as it is, unless it changes. And, I don't know if it'll change or not. That's not a discussion that we can have behind closed doors. That has to take place in a board meeting, so there's no violations that are done. And I can just tell you right now, we've been very preoccupied. I mean, I have a lot of his constituents calling me, and Bruce has taken over some of the city responsibility for San Luis Obispo. So we make sure these constituents are taken care of. There are a lot of very concerned people out there, a lot of very concerned small businesses. People are very worried right now. So that has sort of superseded the chairmanship position and what's going on with that. We have to take care of our immediate constituent needs right now and take care of his too. His legislative aide is working to some degree. I'm not sure what degree that is, but she has participated in some of the meetings. So I'm hoping she's answering some constituent calls and concerns, because there are a lot of them out there right now.
Stu, jump in. What do you want to know?
Well, I think that what I want to know is, have the members of the board agendize the issue of declaring the vacancy in the board. The board chair is up to the discretion of the full board. And in these circumstances, for the mental health of Mr. Hill, and certainly for the health of the residents of San Luis County who need stable and dependable leadership, and I think you have given that, Lynn, since you've been acting as chair.
We got 1 minute for a response from the supervisor. Supervisor, have you agendized this? Do you intend to?
No, I have not agendized it. We don't have a meeting for about 3 weeks. I'm assuming if the issue will come up, it'll come up at that meeting, and whether it's somebody from the public that'll bring it up or another supervisor, I don't know at this point, but that would be the next logical time when this could come up. I do not believe... Nobody has indicated to me that there will be a special meeting called. I'm not going to call a special meeting. I mean, we're in the middle of this crisis right now, and we're dealing with it in his absence. And I believe we're doing a good job dealing with it. And I don't believe there will be a special meeting called for that.
All right, Supervisor Lynn Compton, thank you so much for calling in. We got news, traffic, weather. Stu Jenkins hangs with us. More of your phone calls. What do we do about Adam Hill? Well, that was interesting. We just got a call from County Supervisor Lynn Compton, who's been acting as the interim chair. My guest is Attorney Stu Jenkins, as we're talking about this mess involving Supervisor Adam Hill. What's your reaction to what we just heard, Stu?
Well, it's a little surprising and a little disappointing in a sense. I think the odd thing about the position, or what we heard, is that there's certainly a feeling being conveyed that because of the emergency, we don't want to do anything. But I think from the public standpoint, because of the emergency, we really need to do something so that we have a chair who can lead, and that the public and the other governmental agencies are going to have confidence in. I mean, if you just go back to thinking about would the public think that a school bus driver who had done the things that Mr. Hill did during his mental breakdown, would you trust that school bus driver to be driving the bus with your kids or grandkids on it? And I think if there's that kind of a doubt, it's going to make it actually harder for the county to work its way out of this emergency. So, as I often tell my friends, a lot of people get into elected office and they want to lead and do good things for the public, but once they get into office, a lot of times there are a lot of forces and people telling them what they can't do instead of them taking the initiative to do what they can do.
All right, let's take another call. We've got former U.S. Congresswoman Andrea Seastrand calling in. Hi, Mrs. Seastrand. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, and thank you, Stu, for articulating the issue so well. I back you up 100%. I've written the majority of the board, all of the board, saying exactly what you said to replace Mr. Hill with the vice chair. I'm in the 3rd District, so on many occasions, I have not, because this wasn't the first time that he took a time off, Mr. Hill took time off. So right now, I do not have anyone that represents me. And in this crisis that we're at, and I think it's going to be a long-time crisis, not only the illness and the virus, but when you think about the loss of businesses, the loss of jobs, the oblo going, there's so many things hitting us here locally that I think we need 5 pullers of the oars in the boat. And I think that Mr. Hill needs to be replaced as a first step to show the public that they are serious about taking care of business in this county. I understand when you get elected, you want to show compassion and all that. Hey, I understand that. But the best thing in this situation is to think about the people out here in the public losing their jobs. They're not going to get paid. Mr. Hill will be paid. I'm sure the dollars will come, the health benefits, and so on. And I don't begrudge him that. But in the meantime, the public, the constituents in this county need relief, and they need that 5th person pulling at the oars in that boat to make sure that we do well in this county as well as can be.
And Stu, let me pick up on Mrs. Seastrand's comment. Do you encourage people to write letters to our supervisors about this issue? Would that help? If we're concerned?
Well, I think so. I think it would. And there's really... Andrea has brought up...
phone calls and emails. If there's one thing that public servants listen to is when they start getting phone calls and emails to say, please do something, and you can be polite about it. But I think that's what our 4 on our board need to hear from us. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Stu.
Yeah.
Oh, not at all, Andrea. And I think there's 2 issues, really. And Mrs. Seastrand has brought up one of them, which is having Mr. Hill replaced for the next 3 quarters of this year until his reelection happens. He could resign and go work on his mental health, and Governor Newsom would appoint a caretaker who would have the job and be able to help the rest of the board do the job and represent the 3rd District until early January. And so that's one issue. The other issue is the leadership issue, which is the board chair. If we've got somebody who has difficulty with the stresses of the job and they need to go work on their mental health, they really should not be setting the agenda for the board. They should not be undergoing the stresses and not have the responsibility for issuing the proclamations that it's tough to issue those proclamations because there are people, some people are not going to like having to stop work or having to have a drop in income.
Right.
And they're so there's stresses involved in the job as chair.
All right, Mrs. Seastrand, anything else you want to say?
Well, I would just end it with this. I'd like to see that there are consequences. Watching Mr. Hill over these many years, it's amazing to me. He never has to, what's that saying, face the music. He's always somehow is able to skip through it, and I just would like to see some consequences for the greater good of this county and the constituents and what they're facing now and going to face in the near future.
All right, Mrs. Seastrand, thank you very much for calling in. Let's talk to Sean in San Luis on KVEC. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Sean.
I think we need to look at the math in all of this. On top of this, we're talking about a person who has a lot of responsibility, and their first priority is taking care of themselves. There's one other thing that hasn't been talked about, and that has to do with Helios Dayspring and some of the things going on about him receiving. And this is now I'll cite where this is coming from. Cal Coast News, so I'm just citing what Cal Coast News is reporting. But he's violating things where he received deliveries worth $300 to $400 in pot for free.
Let's stick on Adam Hill. Time is tight.
This is about Adam Hill. Is about Adam Hill. And so on top of his mental wellness, I mean, he's got a lot of issues going on. So how can he deal with all the issues that we're going to be facing on top of all of this? That and whatever else is going on. I mean, the coincidence of the FBI and his attempted suicide. I mean, he definitely should not be responsible for anything right now except himself.
All right, Sean, I'm glad you called. I mean, that gets into the FBI. Of course, Stu, you're innocent until proven guilty, but now there is a cloud over his head, and he could end up being arrested.
Well, and let's think about the innocent until proven guilty. That has to do with a person's personal liberty, a person's freedom from being fined, or frankly, if Mr. Hill was convicted of a felony or some misdemeanors that have to do with his job, that would automatically remove him from office, according to Government Code 1770. But more to the point, here we are in an emergency. And if you have someone who is under federal investigation and they're worried about whether or not they're going to be prosecuted, they're worried about dealing with the FBI, they're not going to be focused on the needs of their constituents. And again, that goes back to, should that individual be the chair of the board? Because and should that individual consider resigning so that they can focus on their own needs, which they're going to do anyway, and have somebody appointed by Governor Newsom who can focus on the needs of the people living in the 3rd District.
Mr. Jenkins, on this broadcast, we're talking about the situation involving 3rd District County Supervisor and Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Adam Hill. If you want in the conversation, pick up the phone, give us a call, 805-543-8830 or 800-549-5832. Well, let's bring in former County Supervisor Frank Meacham. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
We're good, Frank. How are you?
Well, I'm just about dandy fine good, based upon all this craziness that's going on. I was listening to the show tonight, and I think Mr. Jenkins has pretty hit it right on. And one of the things that, going back to, I hate to be bringing this up, but back during the earthquake time, when you have a crisis, you need to have somebody that is the spokesperson. You need to have somebody that's the kind of the leader of the pack, if you will. And I think it's time that the board stepped up and made that firm. And obviously, Mr. Hill is in a situation that he's not either capable or willing or, I don't know, competent to take that role. So I think it's time that the board just moved him aside from that, allow him to go do whatever he has to do to get himself together and move on. Because the county, the folks in this county, they are looking for leadership right now. They're looking for somebody that will step up and say, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and we'll take it on. But they cannot be in a vacuum like that.
Stu, comment, please.
Well, I absolutely agree. And Frank, you were chair several times. And I think if anybody is able to comment on the kinds of things that a chair does that the other members of the board, depend on them to do, you have the ability to articulate that for the listeners today. Can you give us a little bit more?
Well, I mean, I wish them well. I wish everybody well, and I hope that they can get through all of this. But you can't just keep waiting on decisions. You have to make decisions. You have to move on. And that's what I'm hoping for. I have a lot of faith in the supervisors that are there. And I think that they'll make the right choice. They'll move on with things, and somebody will be the spokesperson for them. And I think that now that they've decided to have a supervisor attending their press conferences is a good thing, because the folks know them. They know who the supervisors are because they represent them. Right. And oftentimes you have staff members that are speaking to the county, and folks don't know them. They're good people. Don't get me wrong. They're really good people.
Sure.
But people want to hear from those that they put in office. And I think that now that they're going to do that, I think that's a good thing. Well, so I'm hoping that they kind of come around and say, okay, we have to make a change, we have to make a shift, and as tough as it's going to be, we have to make it happen.
And I'm wondering, Frank Meacham, just thinking out loud, if maybe a delegation of Frank Meacham and Shirley Bianchi would be needed to go to Adam Hill to make that case directly to him.
I don't think Mr. Hill thinks much of me, so I don't know if that would work out. But right. The guy that we lost not too long ago is the one that's most capable of doing so many things across the board. Is Cacho.
That's right.
And I worked with him, and he was an incredible man. So it'll all play out. It'll work out. They'll come to a conclusion, and they'll make something happen. I'm sure of that.
All right. Frank Meacham, thank you so much for calling in. Good to hear from you. Appreciate your time. Stu Jenkins on this broadcast. Tom is in Napomo on KVEC. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Stu made a very important point that, well, he glossed over it, though, and it's been kind of ignored. Now, in this real bad peril we're in right now, we're going to be applying for grants and low-interest loans as a county. Okay, now, we can't go with our hand out having the head of our supervisors, under investigation by the FBI and being suicidal. I mean, we just can't do that. I mean, just think, let's just say you were governor right now, Dave. You're governor.
I'm governor.
Okay, and you got all sorts of things on your desk, and you're distributing money to this county and that county, and something comes up, and you've got two counties. You've got a county over here, and you've got another county that's got a suicidal chairman of the Board of Supervisors who's under the FBI investigation. Who are you going to give money to?
The other county. The other county.
Well, duh.
All right, calm down,
I'm
Tom.
sorry.
Calm down.
That's my opinion. Goodbye.
All right, goodbye. I don't know how he really felt about that one. Stu, what do you say to Tom?
Well, thank you for the call, Tom, and you're always very passionate.
Yeah.
So.
But the premise, you've kind of said this already before, is that perception is reality, and this story is out now. We've got a chair of the County Board of Supervisors who admitted he attempted suicide, and yes, empathy and compassion for him on a personal level, but not on a professional level.
We pray that he gets better. We all pray that.
A good question on the text line: is there a morals clause for a supervisor?
No. There is, in a sense, there's a statute that says that a quo warranto proceeding can be brought to declare that a supervisor is mentally incapable due to disease, illness, or accident to do the job, and can be removed, and that can be brought in a variety of ways. The board certainly could bring that, ask that be brought. The grand jury could ask that be brought. I don't think Mr. Hill would want to go through that, and certainly the county shouldn't have to go through that. His resignation so he could work on his mental health would save everybody the trouble.
All right. That's
there's the morals clause that if you're convicted of a felony or of a misdemeanor involving violation of your official duties, and we're all speculating on why the FBI is issuing and executing search warrants on this supervisor. If there's a conviction, there's an automatic removal. Automatic. The office becomes vacant, and the governor would appoint.
All right. We go to Jeff in San Luis on KVEC. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how are you folks?
Good.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you, Stu? I just tuned in part of the way through. I didn't hear the whole thing. Has anyone talked of doing a recall at this point?
You can't do a recall until September 1st, right, Stu?
A few months, is that correct?
He loses office on December 1st or 2nd, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he was reelected to office. So there's really not time for recall. And I don't think the public likes recalls. I don't like them unless there's some real pressing need. But we've just been through an election. We're about to go through a big election on national issues. But this is the kind of thing where there are ways that a supervisor can be removed. There are things that can happen that remove a supervisor, but in the short term, the most important thing is we need a chair who is regarded as stable and trustworthy, and that's by everyone. And you can't have somebody who's under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation who's attempted suicide and admits it through a drug overdose, and have that person be regarded as stable. And frankly, you want a person in that position to be able to go off and work on their mental health.
Yeah. What else, Jeff?
Yeah, well put, and you hit every base. What I was thinking, I would like to see him out of there based on all the above. I mean, granted, I don't want to see anybody go through any kind of personal torture, through mental anguish. He's obviously been struggling with this for quite some time, but at the same time, we cannot have our elected officials that are capable of making dangerous decisions.
Yep, we've been talking about that, Jeff. Thank you. The last point I want to get to, Stu Jenkins, is the idea is captured in this last text message. A lot of people think that Adam Hill is going to just try to negotiate a buyout. He wants some kind of disability. He wants a deal from the county if they want him to go away.
There's actually a statute that forbids the provision of disability to elected officials.
Excellent.
And so I doubt very much that he is doing that. Certainly there are some people who think that he, some people think that elected officials will use the resignation from their office as a bargaining chip in a criminal proceeding, but we don't know that there is a criminal proceeding. The FBI has executed warrants issued by a federal judge. We don't know if there have been indictments, and I'm sure there's feisty reporters from the Tribune and the New Times and Calcos News and who knows who else trying to find out if there's a sealed indictment someplace. But we don't know. Now, the Board of Supervisors actually has a tremendous amount of ability themselves to do an investigation. They have subpoena power. They can hold hearings and put people under oath to find out what has been going on. After all, anything that the chair of the Board of Supervisors has done has been in their name.
Yeah.
And so it's the kind of thing where if the board was getting good advice on this, they might think about setting up an investigation, probably after the pandemic is dealt with. But in the meantime, they need really good leadership.
All right, Stu Jenkins, we got about 45 seconds for a final thought. We appreciate your time and your expertise on this. Final thoughts about Adam Hill.
My final thought is that there's a 4-line motion that the board could make San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors now declares the office of Chair of the Board of Supervisors to be vacant. Nominations to fill the vacancy will immediately be made to fill the office of Chair following adoption of this resolution. Boom. They will have trustworthy leadership that state officials, federal officials, and the public can trust.
I predict that's going to happen at the opening County Board of Supervisors meeting in April. What do you think? Short answer.
It's up to the board members to have the courage to do that.
All right, sir. We appreciate your time, Stu. Thank you very much. Stu Jenkins checking in. If you missed any part of the show, I urge you to check out the podcast and hear what Lynn Compton had to say. That will be up shortly at 920kvc.com.
Now, back to Dave.
I very much appreciate former Supervisor Frank Meacham and County Supervisor Lynn Compton and former Congresswoman Andrea Seastrand calling in and giving their perspective. And I would echo Mrs. Seastrand, if you're concerned about this, you need to write the Board of Supervisors and say that you don't want Adam Hill to serve as the chairperson. Too much at stake here. Personal opinion. All right, we got news, we got traffic, we got weather. VIP is in the house. My brother Bruce is calling in next. Stick around.